Hey guys, so today for EDUC 3627, we're going to be discussing mental health and wellness and well-being for teachers. So we're going to start it off by talking about how we as teachers might try and avoid burnout and ways we can minimize our workload. So does anyone have anything to say about that?
I know a big thing for me during placement was, I got really burnt out, so I may not be the best at this, but I realised what really burnt me out was not separating schoolwork with home time or just relaxing time. Like, after school, as soon as I went home, I would just get straight into preparing my lessons, and I would just be, non-stop. And so I got really burnt out from that, so for next time, I know to, separate the two.
I think with mine, the two placements I did with the teaching, my teaching placements, I noticed a big difference in my just mental health and the way I handled things. My first placement, I didn't have I was just constantly preparing lessons, and I was constantly just doing work. I had no time for myself, and I think that was due to me finding out what I was teaching so close to me actually having to teach it, so I didn't have much time to prepare. Whereas my recent placement, I had a whole 10 weeks to just prepare what I'll be teaching. So I think just being aware of what you might be doing, and also having that previous experience of feeling comfortable with teaching. And also I think what helped me with my recent placement was having a schedule. So just kind of having a little limit where it's and I even told my students this, that after 8 I won't be replying to any emails, I won't be actually doing any school related work. That will be strictly personal time, so spending time with family, friends, whatever it may be. And I think that's very important to try and just separate work with personal life to stay, I guess, mentally sane.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think you can't let it completely control your life outside of work, or it's going to be just you're going to burn out really quickly, I think. Yeah, and on that note, a very important thing can be to actually be able to disconnect from that work mindset and just slow down and be present. And one of the links that we've provided is about practicing mindfulness, which can be a really good strategy to actually disconnect for a bit, whether it's after school or whether it's throughout the school day with students. But yeah, that's definitely shown some great health benefits for teachers, and I think it can definitely help with not burning out.
I think as well, as a pre-service teacher and as an early careers teacher, that asking for help when you need it as well from teachers who are more experienced than you is always a good idea, instead of putting too much weight on yourself. I found that lots of teachers in my placements were always very happy to help me, even if they weren't my mental teacher. Everyone seemed really positive and happy to help me, so I think that definitely helped me a lot.
And I found the important thing, my supervisor was always expecting me to work. So when I was planning lessons, he wanted me to have one lesson, few lessons. So usually what the main thing I learned from him is that he's using the time wisely. So most of the free times he's going to other classrooms to have a chat with the teachers. So then, after 3 to 4 o'clock, he's just doing the planning for the next few weeks. So I found that really helpful to me as well, as because I did my first, so I'm still there. So I try to do some of those strategies, and really was really beneficial for me, because time management, again, I think it's another important.
Being organized.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Well, I might move on to the next question about strategies we could adopt in the future. How hard would it be to ensure better mental health for yourself and other staff? What strategies did you use on placement? We already discussed that. And is it possible to have a mentally healthy school?
I can speak on that one. So to ensure better health and mental health for myself and other staff, so when I was on placement, the staff, I think especially because of COVID, they were really supportive. Everyone really looked out for each other. I found that my mental teachers would often send some other people who were feeling stressed, would have a chat with them, see how they were going, and I think that actually meant quite a lot to them and to me to see that everyone is quite supportive.
Yeah, staff supporting one another. Huge. Yeah.
I think actually like opening the conversation with other people is always really helpful.
I think also having activities with the staff other than PD would be helpful as well, as like a staff and as a community. So I remember at my placement, teachers were planning on going on a wine tour during like the holidays. So I thought that was pretty like nice to like actually, you know, communicate with colleagues in a setting which is not, you know, your classroom or your staff room and stuff like that. And that probably helps, you know, just the atmosphere and like the community that you build.
I definitely agree with that. So this next question, I think it's a really good question, especially with the growing issue of teachers leaving the profession like early in their careers. But it's about how do we motivate ourselves to teach, and do teachers use mainly intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, and which do we think is more effective?
Well, I like to comment on that, and I strongly believe that intrinsic motivation is important, because you can argue that extrinsic motivation is important because we need money. But at the end of the day, like even though you need money, still if you have to do your job every day, right? So how can you enjoy it if you are not actually focusing on money? So I think intrinsic motivation is important, and especially teachers, if you are teaching your main area, like for example, I'm doing maths, but maybe people can have different subjects. So if you are actually enjoying and you're really good at your subject, I think motivation is important.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially on that note of burning out that we talked about later. If you don't have any intrinsic motivation for what you're doing, even if you're getting it done and you have that extrinsic motivation which is pushing you to do it, like you're much more likely to burn out early and not feel passionate about it.
I think in the PowerPoint that the group presented for this week, they spoke about how, I think it was that, I'll try and find it and maybe put a link to if it was an article that they were referring to, teachers who were able to continue to participate in activities related to the subject that interested them into actually teaching, they tend to stay motivated for longer, and they tend to be more interested in teaching. So, for example, let's say my background is science. If I go into teaching and then completely lose connection with science, I feel like I also would lose motivation to teach, because what motivates me is like the like interesting facts about science and being able to like, you know, introduce that to students. So I think that is my like main sort of thing. And if I were to lose touch with that, I feel like I would also feel unmotivated and not wanting to teach. So I think having that connection with why you started to teach is very important to like remain in touch with that.
Yeah, I've got the link to that article, Shikha, and yeah, it is a really, really good point. And yeah, it goes on about things such as art teachers actually practicing art outside of just their teaching, or biology teachers being able to like go out in nature and observe the things that they find really interesting about biology, or like any other way. But yeah, I think that is really important, and I think a good sort of way to keep yourself engaged in that as a teacher could be to like take on some like extracurricular sort of areas that might have to do with your studies. So like if you're a biology teacher and you take the students who are actually quite passionate about biology and really want to push themselves and do it in an interesting way that isn't graded, so it's not like, it can be challenging for students but it's not like pressure on them, then that could be a really good way to do that. Art therapy workshops as well, which are really good for student well-being, and we've got a link to that as well, which goes into detail about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, not only does that benefit you in the long term, but also like your students are going to benefit from that, right? If you're more passionate about what you're teaching, they're going to be too. Like, I think for all of us, some of the best teachers we had were the ones who really loved, like you could tell they loved their subject and they knew so much, even just random facts if it wasn't even relevant to what the topic was, like those classes we remember. So it benefits our students too.
All right, so let's move on to this last question. How detrimental is classroom noise on wellness and well-being? What is an unacceptable and an acceptable noise level? And do students react differently depending on the noise level in the class? Well, one thing I was going to add straight off about that is I remember a while ago reading about teachers like having speech problems, and like it's quite a common thing for teachers to develop problems with their vocal cords from constantly having to like yell over students, which is going to make your teaching life harder as well as like affect your personal life. So I guess that's one way that like a lot of noise in a classroom might negatively affect a teacher's wellness and well-being.
I know in the past as well we talked about students with perhaps different disabilities, so hearing impairments, or I think it's students with ASD. A lot of background noise can really stress them out. So yeah, obviously that's a huge barrier to learning for them.
Yeah, I think actually, a lot of different like learning difficulties could be affected more depending on the noise in the classroom. Like you said, ASD or like just any hearing impairment, like all that background noise would make it very hard to hear the teacher. Or ADHD, like there's going to be more constant distractions. Same with like Asperger's.
I feel like as teachers, it's very important to have a routine which students are aware of to sort of bring back attention or focus to yourself. So let's say you're having group assignments or like group work, it's necessary for students to sort of, discuss, and sometimes it does get a bit too much. But I think having like some words, like in my class, I used things like freeze. And, students would have to drop what they were doing, just look at me. And if there were some students that, were still talking, I'd like, wait. And if they were talking, I'd like, just be like, what does freeze mean? And it's like, stop what you're doing. So just kind of reminding them, having that routine, I think, helps you as a teacher to sort of remain calm as well, because, students are aware of that routine. You know what you need to do. You won't have to like exert yourself to try and get focus back to yourself. So maybe having a routine would help.
Yeah. And regarding that noise level, so accepted noise level is okay, because sometimes, when you have to do something, you have to discuss with your peers and you have to come up with ideas. So acceptable noise level is okay, but if it is unacceptable, then of course it's going to irritate teachers.
Yeah, that's definitely another effect, I think, on teachers' wellness and well-being. If you're constantly going into a classroom and you don't have control over them being noisy and continually talking over each other, then it is really going to irritate you, and you're probably going to leave work most days in a bad mood about that. So
yeah, over the time that can really burn you out as well.
I think it also helps having like that first day you're in the classroom, having those class expectations straight up, like as soon as you just, this is my expectations, these are the consequences to not following these rules. And also I've noticed if you incorporate students into creating those class expectations, they take more responsibility for them. So they tend to feel like a sense of, responsibility to actually have to follow those things. So if they have those expectations, I feel like that's one thing you can always go back to. Like, what's our class rules? Are you following them? Do you think you could be doing something better to follow them? So I think having those routines, those rules set also help, like just from day one, having a better sort of class atmosphere. But obviously you will have students which will always, tend to not follow what you want. But I guess having that base, that foundation, will help. So my inquiry project, I don't know. So for professional educator, for my inquiry project, I'm actually talking about early year career like teachers and their mental health, and how they can like some strategies to actually better their mental health, and how they can stop from burning out and stuff like that. So that will be finished by week 12. So I can actually include that as a link into this video. So that will probably help, add to some resources.